one thing that's been, it's a reality of the game, but it's stunk to start the season. There have been a number of injuries that have impacted people in their status for opening night. You got Kawhi Leonard out for weeks to start the season. We haven't really seen him play we haven't seen him play consistently since like last March. Joel Embiid is not playing to start the season. Paul George not playing to start the season, which you alluded to a little bit earlier. Jaren Jackson Jr. almost back. Zion Williamson was sick on the opening night, so nothing to really be afraid about. But DeJounte Murray has a great game in his Pelicans debut, breaks his hand in the process. We can talk about the Raptors. They were blown out by 30 points on opening night, and they were already down 4 guys, Barrett, Brown, Walter, and Kelly Olynyk, and then Emmanuel quickly gets hurt after turning in a pretty good first half. Chris Middleton, another guy you mentioned, with those teams. So when I go through this list of injuries, who are you most concerned about? Not necessarily the designation of their injury, but what it's going to do as far as a setback for their team and their team's trajectory. And then I guess who are you not as worried about with what's going on in these injuries?
We talked about it on the pod a little bit last week, but like Paul George and Joel Embiid, like that Sixers team did not look good last night without those 2 guys.
No.
And this just in, like you're missing 2 all-stars and one of the best players in the league. Like, yeah, your team's probably not going to look very good, but like the Sixers are, when they bet on Paul George and signed him this offseason, like that is a bet on his health. And that is a risky game to play when your best player is already someone who you are constantly gambling on his health. So now you have 2 players who can't stay on the court, and they're supposed to be 2 of the pillars alongside Tyrese Maxey that are supposed to take you over the hump. And like you just said, they're not on the court. So like that is concerning to me. Paul George is back at practice today. I had just got a notification. Joel Embiid, we already know what his status is going to be. Like he already said he's not going to be playing back-to-backs. He's trying to preserve himself for the playoffs. He doesn't care about the 65 game minimum. Doesn't care about MVP, scoring titles, All NBA, all these things that, require you to play a minimum of 65 games. But like, okay, so you're just going to show up in the playoffs and hope that everything is free flowing and as if you had been there all season long when like you only played 50 something games. Like that's not a recipe for success, especially against kind of like we talked about at the beginning of the show. Like the Celtics are entering Warriors territory in the sense that like you have to play so perfect to beat them because they're so good on offense and they're so sound on defense. So like if you're a team that is going in there where let's say Paul George plays 55 games and Joel Embiid plays 58 games, and they don't really know how to play alongside each other all that well because they didn't share the court all that much this season because, for all we know, they were alternating games where, PG's out, Joel Embiid's in, Joel Embiid's out, PG is in. Like, that's not a team that's going to be able to make a deep run in the postseason. So, to me, the Sixers are the team that I am the most concerned about. And I think a lot of people would share the same opinion with these early season injuries. For someone that I'm not as concerned about, I mean, obviously the DeJounte Murray news is tough. But Zion Williamson with an illness, like, all right, that doesn't actually, preclude to like him not being able to stay healthy this year. And obviously he doesn't have a great track record there. Mm-hmm. So like, I'm not going to sit here and say, Zion Williamson, here comes his healthiest season yet, because, then he's, probably going to come up hobbling in his next game and miss the next month and a half as they're trying to be cautious with him. So like, obviously there's always cause for concern for Zion, but like, I saw a lot of people on the timeline yesterday, like, oh, of course Zion's not ready for opening night, like, yada, yada. And it's like, the guy's sick. Like, yes, ideally you could play through a sickness or whatever it is. You don't know what the illness is, but like, come on, man. And this isn't like another, like, just injury management thing. Like, he's just not feeling well. He'll be back out there. And, I hope that he has a healthy season because we've seen what he can do when he's actually on the court.
Yeah, speaking of injury management, we'll know more about it probably when we record next week. But the NBA is opening an investigation in the Joel Embiid situation. There's the player arrest policy, and they're trying to figure out whether or not the Sixers are adhering to that. So once we know a little more about that and we can speak with a little more expertise, we will talk about that. I hear you on Zion. I'm the same. I am a little concerned, and this is probably because I'm so close to it. When I sent the DeJounte Murray news into my group message with my friends who are big New Orleans sports fans, one of them responded, man, I might just have to give this up for my sanity. And like, it is true, man. Like, it's all, you turn the corner and it's always something. I know I mentioned it when we were kind of coming back from the break that, Brandon Ingram was coming back from an injury, and he kind of admitted that he came back too early from an injury during last year's play-in tournament and the playoffs. And the reason he did that, because Zion, when he had 40 points and turned in one of the best play-in tournament performances we've ever seen, comes up with a hamstring injury and can't play in the playoffs. And it's always something that happens. Again, DeJounte Murray, I think it was 14 or 16 points, 10 and 8 boards in his first ever Pelicans game. And they got a win without Zion over the Bulls, who were scrappy a little bit and kind of kept hanging around. Shout out to Lonzo Ball back on the court, by the way. And then he breaks his hand. I've been seeing it depends on the type of fracture it is. And I'm not going to pretend to be a doctor to know and understand the way a hand works. But people are saying he's probably going to miss 15 or 18 games. And, you know, in the grand scheme of things, he's going to be fine. But it's like, man, these were a crucial 15, 18 games to kind of give them a head start to understand how to play with each other, because he's such a ball dominant player who's actually trying to revert to his old ways after spending some time playing next to Trae Young and being himself. And I think that it could just it drags out even more. And Trey Murphy is still out. He hurt his hamstring during preseason. He got paid. Shout out to Trey Murphy also, by the way. But thinking about that, like now that means that they probably won't learn each other and figure each other out till maybe close to the All-Star break, which they'll be a scary team down the stretch of the season. But when you delay those things, 3 or 4 months, that's an interesting thing. And it'll be curious to see how it plays. I was looking at their schedule. They weirdly go to Portland and play 2 games there, so they should be fine. And then they go to the Bay and also play 2 games against the Warriors. So 4 of their first 5 games against 3 different teams, but we'll see how they bounce back from that.